Hey guys, welcome back to week 7 of developing the right hand. My name is Evan Tauscher with jamplay.com, and we're getting there. We're on week 7 out of 10. We've developed a lot of techniques now, and we're going to do something a little bit different today than the path we were doing before. Last week we were talking about string crossing and then applying this arpeggio position to actually doing single note scales. So if you missed that week or any of the previous ones where we talked about everything from balancing the right hand on the guitar and what fingers to use and going into arpeggios and scales and these types of things, definitely watch those classes. You can find them on Jamplay's site, and you can definitely find more in my full course on Jamplay. That being said, thanks for tuning into this live stream, and if you have any questions about anything I'm going to talk about today, then leave them in the comments, and at the end of this stream, I'll be answering them. So, to the best of my ability, as many as possible. So, without further ado, what we're going to be talking about today is developing the extensor muscles, and doing so through a technique called Rasgueado. Now, I'm not a flamenco player. I play minimal flamenco guitar, but something that my right hand technique has definitely benefited from is from developing my extensor muscles. So, let me explain what that is. You have flexor muscles, which are the ones that you typically use when playing guitar, right? Like plucking like this. And then there's extensor muscles that you use from going the opposite way, like extending your fingers like this. Extensor, extending, right? So, there's a lot of talk about how to develop speed and just basically plucking like this, using your flexor muscles. But there's one step in that forgotten, which is that it's not just about how fast you pull through the strings, but how fast you return. And some of that is through some very small muscles within your fingers and arm and all the way up through your forearm that are your extensor muscles. So it's a really good idea to develop these. And also it might open you up to a new technique. Some of this Rasgueado might get you interested in flamenco guitar. And for classical guitar, it really applies too, because there's a lot of pieces in the classical repertoire that involve extensor muscles, and if you're playing basically any other style, a lot of times they're strumming, right? It'd be nice to know some other patterns. So we're going to be doing everything from triplet patterns to 4-note patterns, to 4 articulation patterns, so we'll just call it that for now. And we're going to be starting really basic, so don't worry. Let's go ahead and look at measure 1 here. And actually, you see just 2 measures of open E here, right? We're going to just extend that while we talk about this a second, okay? So instead of doing this, which is how it appears to be notated, right, just plucking through the strings, we're going to be flicking through them the other way. So not anything like this yet. We're just going to be flicking through the strings. Okay, let's try that. And if doing 2 different fingers is difficult right now, like doing I then M, try just doing your index. And get that feeling of flicking. You notice my nails resting here and then flicking outwards. Now, what I just did there was bad, and I'd like you to try not to do here, which is extend your finger out all the way like this and point. There's no need to go that far, okay? So you notice you get the same sound by just flicking through the string and then relaxing your fingers so that it's just hanging out, like I always say, right? So, just try to flick through the string and don't go like this, right? There's no need to point over to whoever's sitting over there. So, just index, maybe 4 or 8 times. Then now let's just do our middle finger, so like this. And same thing, not a full extension like this, but just flicking out like that. Believe it or not, this is developing those extensor muscles. And trust me, if you don't feel it now, you will feel it later. Not later as in tomorrow, but later in this live stream. Okay, and now back to index. And I'm curious, you guys can let me know in the comments, which one is more difficult for you? Flicking through and controlling that index finger, or flicking through and controlling that middle finger? tell you, for me, it's my index, just because the length of my middle finger is quite long. Like, everyone's got different lengths fingers, but my middle finger is longer and it's closer to the string. So that one actually is a little bit easier for me, where my index I have to adjust just a little bit. Okay. So now let's try alternating those fingers, right? Like I was doing at the very beginning. So after one flicks, the other one comes back and gets ready to pluck. So just like we were talking last week, if you were tuned in, what I'm trying to do here is not flick out really far. I'm trying to be pretty controlled in my motion. And you'll notice this doesn't sound all that different from this, which is just alternating normally and using my flexors, like the way we normally make notes. But here's me going between normal notes, so plucking them, right? And now flicking them. It's not all that different. You just hear a little bit more of the nail, right? And that's what adds that percussive sound of something like flamenco. So, here we go. Let's alternate. Maybe 8 times. Okay, and now, as a bonus round here, we've already done middle finger, but we haven't done our A finger, okay? Let's try alternating middle finger and A, which is our ring finger. So middle finger, ring finger, middle finger, ring finger, middle finger, ring finger. Even if it's pretty inconsistent, it's a really nice way to just develop a little bit more control in your right hand. Okay, so we won't be using that A finger until a little bit later, but it's nice to get a start at that and try to start feeling what it's like to move that A finger a lot. Okay, now, if you notice, I just have this simple little thing where we're going to be going now to the second string, okay? So I'm going to move like this, index, middle, and up to the C on the first fret, second string, 3, 5, so that to the E, then to this D again. So notice it's a lot harder on this second string not to hit the first string, right? This is a really nice way to build control. Now if you hit that first string every now and then, it's okay. We're going to be doing that, if you see in measure 12, we're going to be doing that in just a second. So don't worry too much if you are. But if you can flick the string and control to not hit that first string, then that's a lot of great control you're building. If not, don't worry, we're still building that muscle. Let's do that again from measure 3. Is this open B? Might look really easy, but if you're trying this with me, it's probably not as easy as you think, right? So now let's switch I and M and do M, then I. So M, I. And that just changes your accents a little bit. Beat 1's going to be a little bit louder, and each of the downbeats are going to be a little bit louder, just naturally. And it's good to build that evenness between fingers so that one's not always weaker, right? Okay, let's do that again. M, I to the C. You'll see I occasionally hit other strings too. Like I said, that's okay. Okay, now let's move down to the third string. We won't spend too much time here because this is just like the B string where you have, a string above and below that you can possibly bump into. So here we have 1, so on this G sharp, 2 to the A, 4, 5 to that C, back to the B, then A, G sharp. Now what this is outlining is what we're about to do in measure 12, which is this. so it's not too hard of a pattern. We have G sharp, B, E, right? Then we move, actually you can use your second finger here on the first fret. That way you just slide up to that A, and then your first finger comes down on that C on that first fret. And then I'm sliding those same fingers up 2 frets, so it's... my third and fourth finger down here on that C and E, 5th fret, on the 3rd and 2nd string, and then open E. But if you really don't want to use your 3rd and 4th finger, you can just do this. You know, 1 and 2 slid up, and you know, just as long as they're on the same frets as opposed to different frets here. Now this alone, you could spend so much time just continuously building up that speed. Now that's not something you typically do as alternating I and M in flamenco music, never making that claim. This is just something that you can do to build your extensor muscles, which I think you'll find really beneficial. And we're going to be using some of these elements as we actually apply this to a musical example. But before we do that, let's try doing M, A, M, A, M, A, M, A. Okay? So, same exercise, but starting on our M finger. If the single strings were easy, this is likely to be much harder than before. Okay, let's do that again. Re, M. And just like before where we started with the M finger rather than the I, let's start with the A finger rather than the M. So it's going to be A, M, A, M. So ring, middle, right? A, M, A, M, A, M, A, M, A, M, A, M, A, M. Like I said, that one expected to be difficult. It's not fingers that we typically develop the extensors with, and especially if you play other styles and maybe sometimes you strum with your index and thumb, then these fingers are getting almost no work, and maybe your index and possibly middle have a little bit more experience in that. So don't worry if that comes along slow. Just if you can get it alternating, even just a couple of times, that's a nice start, and then you can come back to a video like this and try it once you've gotten a little bit more experience doing that. And by the way, before I go any further, it's really worth mentioning that these exercises don't necessarily have to take place on a guitar. And I tell people this all the time. I tell people this all the time about Rasgueado, which just basic stuff that I do. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a flamenco player, but when years and years ago, I was doing a delivery job, and when I was waiting on things, I would just practice on my leg. Like if I was wearing jeans or shorts or whatever it was, I would just practice these extensor exercises because I had heard from a teacher of mine that was really nice to practice, really good thing for your technique, and I would just do it all the time because I was thinking, well, shoot, if I'm just sitting here, what else am I going to do, right? And just look at your phone. Well, why not practice something, right? So I would just practice things like this and get those extensor muscles working. And once they started to feel a little bit sore, like, oh, wow, I can feel that, then I'd take a break and maybe try it an hour or two later. So worth trying. Okay, let's do that same exercise. I realized we didn't start with M on that one. We only did one starting with I, and then we did both of the MA and AM. But let's do M-I. Sound good? Ready? And... so notice the accent happening on the M finger, the middle finger. Okay, let's try to do I-M again. Maybe a little bit faster like this. And by the way, if you don't hit every string every time, that's okay. It's never expected that every time you play Rasgueado, you hit every single string that your fingers guide to. In fact, that tends to sound mechanical if you always hit every string. It sounds better if sometimes you hit that third string and sometimes you just hit the top two. It's just, like I said, getting those extensor muscles working. Just test some of your limits like that and get feeling sore. So, if your hands are already feeling it, then just shake them out for a second, maybe stand up. I'm not standing up during these live streams because obviously I'm in camera here, but every few minutes you should be standing up and, stretching out and moving your back around because, guitar can really do a number on you. So, it's really important you do that. My exception is that I'm the one doing this stream. Okay, so this measure 17. Let's take a look at that. That's where we're going to be applying this in a musical way. It's actually quite fun. I hope you guys enjoy this one. And by the way, let me know which one of those combinations were most difficult for you so far, or if you have any questions about the combinations, I'd be happy to answer them. Just put them in the comments. Okay, measure 17. We're going to start with an A minor chord right here. And I'll tell you, I just did this P-I-M-A, but this is the way I'll play this. P-P-I-M. So we're dragging our thumb through those first two strings. Thumb, index, middle. But if you want to do P-I-M-A, then that's all right. Or even P-P-P-P. That's fine. Whatever is easiest for you there. That's not what matters so much, right? We're talking about extensor muscles. But anyways, before I teach the rest of this, keep on taking a look at it, but I'll just play for you what this sounds like. Okay, simple enough, right? It's just a nice little series of chords that you'll hear all the time. Here I'm doing P-I-M-A. Like I said, it doesn't matter too much. Oops. Okay, so one thing that you should know is that when we go to this E chord, you can, if you'd like, just play this normal E major, but I'm adding this F in there, right? That second, that ninth. So, let's play through this together, and I'll just talk you through the fingerings. So that's A, E, A, C. So O, 2, 2, 1, just an A minor chord. And then now we're just going to hit the top three strings. But if you want to try hitting more of the strings, like down to that fourth string or the fifth string, go for it. Let's do that a few more times, just on that A chord. So you'll see in that last one, since we're reaching all the way down to the 6th string, I'm using my thumb for 3 of those bass notes. So I'm going all the way through that F on the 3rd fret, and then index here on the 3rd string, 1st fret. Okay, great. So, now that you've done that a bit, I'm seeing what is next here. Ah, that's right. Now let's try doing MA here. It's going to be a little bit tougher. Okay, so same exact thing. We end on M here, and then it's actually kind of nice because after we play that M finger, their fingers are already back, ready for us to... Let's actually take this one a little bit slower. Maybe this speed. We're gonna just stay on these bass strings. Or sorry, stay on this chord. Then now let's move to D. Okay, so by now you might be a little bit sore in the right hand. That's okay. And by the way, any questions, drop them in the comments. I'll answer them at the end. Very happy to try to help you through this because I know something can be confusing, and for the right hand doing these extensor movements, don't feel like you're too beginner here. It's definitely confusing in the beginning, but you know, even away from the guitar, like I said, examine how your fingers can do that in other places. I mean, even on my hand here, I can feel as if it's the guitar because you just have that resistance, right, against your skin or whatever. And I can easily feel that same feeling. So, you know, practice it anywhere. While you're having coffee in the morning on the side of the coffee cup, right? I don't have mine here with me, but I do that a lot. Okay, so let's talk about a finger that's been neglected so far, which is our thumb. And our thumb has a lot of responsibility on the guitar, right? Especially classical guitar, really all styles, right? Your thumb has to do a lot because most of the time it's responsible for the bass line. It's like the pianist's left hand, right? They play all the bass lines here, and then you have something else going on over here. Well, we don't have the luxury of 2 hands right in this spot, right? This one has to do all of the work as far as making the notes. And then this one has to do all the work as far as like creating them. So creating doesn't make sense, but you know what I'm saying. Actually adjusting the notes, and then this one's creating the actual sound. So our thumb is responsible for a lot of the bass lines in the music that we play, and it gets tired quite easily. And sometimes you'll feel soreness here or on the inside of the finger. So developing the extensors helps a lot, and I created this little exercise you'll see in measure 26. Just to help you strengthen that a bit, okay? So we're going to start involving the thumb in some of these exercises we're doing here. So, okay, let's start by just doing this. Measure 26, you'll see it's just an F power, right? If you want to do it like this, the rocker way, but I just do 1, 3, 4, right? I've got my other fingers in a very normal position. My thumb is just flicking upwards, right? Hasn't done this motion as much. It's like giving a thumbs up, right? That's worth noting. You can see my hand. It's just my thumb moving in this situation. I'm not going like this, right? It's super cheating. And it's very inefficient and, you know, pretty silly looking too. I mean, I guess you could go for this kind of look, but doesn't work work in this situation. Right? Keep your I, M, and A on those top 3 strings. That's a good way to know that you're staying in the same place. Let's just keep doing that. If your hand is sore and starts to hurt, then just stop. Take a break. Shake it out, stand up. Let's do this a little bit more. Once more through this pattern. Good. Now, that exercise was kind of just to give us a break from working on these other 2 fingers, our index and middle. And we're going to go back to that now, that same exercise we were doing before, starting on measure 17. And what we're going to do is we're going to involve actually alternating of the index finger. So we're going to have an upstroke like this. You see how this works? So we're going to be flicking through, and then we're going to be plucking up through several of the strings. So at least 2, and then maybe 3 sometimes, right? So instead of going like this, I am, we're going to be doing I, but it's down, so down towards the floor, then up towards your face, right? And what this does is it gives a really natural sense of the downbeat and the upbeat, right? This is stronger than that coming up, so. So you'll notice a much more natural sound there because you have down, you have strong beats and weak beats, just like you do in all types of music, right? So you can even try this upstroke and downstroke and measure 12. Try to get your finger to just feel loose. Now, what I mean is you don't want to feel like this rigid movement in your finger, but you want to feel that your joints easily collapse like this. You know, just very, very movable. Everything very, very movable. Because otherwise it sounds like this. Just way too powerful. Hopefully that's not hurting your ears there. So, like I said, measure 12. Strings by accident. Okay, now that we're at measure 12 again, let's go ahead and use our middle finger to do the same thing. And now while we don't do this often with our A finger in any of the music that I've seen, it's worth trying just to strengthen it. And before we get all the way through this to actually the next really fun patterns that we're about to be doing with triplets and such, but in alternating with the thumb, we use our pinky a little bit in this kind of technique, and actually strengthening the extensor muscle of your pinky actually helps with your A finger since these tendons are so connected. So it's worth just trying doing a few of these with your pinky too. We're not going to go through all of these exercises with so many different fingers, but try doing this with your pinky too. And I think you'll find something interesting. Actually, as we know with all parts of life, a lot of things are psychological, right? And our A finger is typically the weakest finger just because we almost never use our pinky, right? So we always think, our A finger, that's the one I have to strengthen. That one's so out of control. Well, something I find is that if I practice for like 5 minutes with my pinky, I didn't expect to find this when I did this, but if I practice, maybe I just do a simple scale or something. My pinky sounds terrible right now as I never play with it, but if you just do a little bit of, maybe play your favorite song or whatever, all with your pinky, and then you go back to playing with your A finger, it feels like one of your strongest fingers. Really, it's like all of a sudden, it's almost this confusion. You're just like, wait, this one is my A finger, this is the one that's usually weak. It's pretty nice. So give it a try. I think you'll find the same. I do that quite often. Especially when I'm feeling tight or tense with that finger, or it's not doing what I'm asking it to do. I'll practice with the pinky and then see what happens. Okay, so we had just went over measure 26 with our thumb, trying to introduce the thumb to the equation and get it a little bit stronger. And you can go back and do that a few times. I was actually just sliding my third and fourth finger down. Okay, so now we're at measure 29. And what we're going to practice here is alternating our thumb with our middle finger, which is probably the most common one to alternate it with, just because it's so close to your index that they interfere a little bit. But let's start with just doing, notice my thumb interacting with my middle finger here now. There's something a little bit different when we do alternation between our thumb and another finger. I'll explain that. Before, down here, we were just lifting our thumb, right? And when we're up here, you could just do that, but it doesn't put your middle finger in an advantageous position to pluck the next string. So what we're actually going to do is twist our hand like this. Twisting our arm, like I like to say opening a door, right? Twisting a doorknob, it's like that. So really try this, because I've taught this in private lessons, in Zoom lessons. I always find that people do this, and they move their arm, like moving from the elbow, like this. I'm exaggerating, usually it's just this kind of movement that I see, but it should be this. Notice my hands are staying right above the strings where they are. I'm just twisting my hand, and when you twist, like this, your M finger is now in a better position to do that, right? To flick back out. Now, when you flick out with your M finger, your middle finger, you do that same twist, but the opposite direction. So, I'm exaggerating with all these. It's not this, obviously, but on a smaller scale, it is. You'll notice my arm is not doing this. It's not like we're playing really loud power chords at a huge concert with Marshall Stacks behind us, We are, we're just twisting our arm a little bit, right? We're turning something, we're turning a doorknob. That's the best way to think of it. Okay, so let's just try that. We're at measure 29. This just goes A minor, D minor, A minor, and then to this G, B, E, right? Little E major, first inversion. So, I just wrote it 8 times here, measure 30 now. So we have inflex, your thumb goes back to its normal position. Like this. Let's go back to the beginning, A minor. And if you're trying this on your own, see if it matches my hand. If you have questions, put in the comments, really. like I said, every time my thumb played there's a strong beat. Let's try reversing it, and let's start with M. So we're starting with that twist that way, that twist, away from the guitar like you're waving to someone, and then up with your thumb like you're waving at yourself, right? You're looking at your palm, you're looking at the top of your hand. So we're going to start with M. And this time, just for the sake of control, try to have that accent on your M finger, see? And have your thumb be a lighter stroke. Now let's try that same thing with your index finger and thumb. So let's start with thumb up starting, and then index. Let's do the accent with our index finger. So starting with A minor. Good. Okay. That's great. That's a nice start to involving our thumb and interacting with our other fingers. And if you've gotten this far, that is great. I mean, you've made a lot of progress. You've got a lot to work on already. Don't let this next section overwhelm you. If you're not ready for it, come back to it later. And I'm not saying to turn off the stream. It's probably good to hear how to move your fingers. But don't feel like this is logically after doing that before. You should be able to do this now. It takes some practice, and the control of the movement and that twisting is really important. You don't want to be doing this. It's impossible speed. If I tried to do that while doing that, I'd be first off scratching my guitar. I'm not even going to try it, but it takes some time to build up the control. So don't worry too much now if it's a little bit slow. All right, let's look at measure 34. This is where we have triplets. This is where we start having this continuous pattern. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. You've got the way that Paco de Lucia did it, which is thumb, middle, index, thumb, middle, index. So always accenting on your thumb. It sounds like this. Or and try not to get it. You have this triplet, 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 trip. So I meant to explain in this one, your thumb does an upstroke, then your middle finger comes out, but you do not twist with your middle finger this time, right? So before we were doing this, where with your middle finger you twist your arm like this, like waving to someone else, right? But this time, you're going to just flick your middle finger out like that, like extending it, like we did at the very beginning, right? But when your index finger comes, that third note of the pattern, that's where you twist, because you're preparing your thumb again, right? Now that coordination takes a little while. Don't rush it at all. Like I said, thumb, middle, then twist, twist, middle, twist, twist, middle, middle. Oh, sorry. Middle, index, twist, thumb, twist, middle. I think this is easier to say. Twist, twist, middle, twist, twist. Or maybe turn is better. So it's actually turn. So starting with your thumb. to say at the same time as playing, but you twist, 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 twist. Hopefully you get the pattern. If you have any questions or I'm being unclear, let me know. I'll clarify it afterwards, please. So as we're talking about those things that I used to practice, like, anywhere, I was doing a delivery job, like I said, and I was just practicing on my leg all the time. And you can, maybe you won't be able to hear through this, but you could hear on your leg the rhythm even. This sounds silly. I actually had a metronome plugged into like the auxiliary port, or if something like that. It was like a FM transmitter or something. And I would actually practice with a metronome in there, and that way it was really even, and you don't necessarily need to hear your fingers moving over like a car engine or something. You can just hear the metronome and feel that motion. But yeah, that really, really helps, and it's fun to play this kind of stuff, right? And of course, you can do this with bigger chords, but 3 strings is easier to pass through. If you want to do it with that E with the F in it there, you can do that. But actually, this pattern, and the way I typically do it, is, for me, easier to go thumb, middle, index. It's the same pattern, so turn with your thumb, your A finger, your ring finger, flicks out, and then your index turns. So same thing with M, except substituting M for A. And to me, that's easier because these fingers are just more evenly spaced out, right? Like, you have this other side of your hand that when you turn, it's closer to where you're turning from anyways. Hopefully that makes sense, but it's a lot easier to control for me. Like I just say, I do this flamenco kind of stuff kind of minimally, but these exercises help a lot, so give that a go. I'm just going to do that again with you guys. So thumb, ring, index, thumb, ring, index, thumb, ring, index. Let's move to the D chord. To the A minor chord. Into that E major, first inversion, with that G sharp at the bottom, then open B and E. Okay? Now let me show you another way to do this. You can also use that method where we have that index finger flicking back up. I'll show you. Instead of using a thumb at all, you can actually just do middle, index, index. So you have that third beat being a weak beat, M, I, right? So M, I, and you can actually just rest your thumb here on the A string. You'll see that. So here you have no twisting involved, and it's a fairly simple one, but it's, I think, a little bit harder to get fast. But you guys let me know. Does this feel easier? I'll tell you that when you do the ones involving the thumb, it is a little bit difficult to get the motion at first, but once you do, it feels way more natural. And it feels less wacky, I suppose. But this one is really commonly used too, and you can imagine that it's probably used at times where you have your thumb involved a lot, and you can't afford to get your thumb involved in the process because then you won't have any bass notes happening. So in the last few minutes here, and by the way, we're about to jump into the Q&A, so definitely leave your questions now if you haven't already. But I'm just going to leave you with an exercise I wrote here at the end just in case we had time, and we have just a little bit here. And if you read the top line of this where the notation is, it looks very confusing. Actually, this is one of the places where tab is really nice. It's just a chromatic scale going, just moving up one fret, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 the whole time. Once you get to the top, it's 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just moving down one fret at a time. But instead of plucking it like that normally, we're just going to do that with our index and middle, or maybe with your M and A, so your middle and ring finger, or maybe your ring then A, or maybe your index then A, then index. You can do this in all sorts of different ways. But I'll show you what I do here as a nice little exercise to combine this with actual plucking. I'll do this, so I'm going to flick at first. So extensor muscles, like we're training here. Index, middle, index, middle. We're going to do this all the way up to the 12th fret. And then on the way back down, I'm going to do normal plucks, right? So extensor muscles, like actually plucking the string. And I'm going to play special focus to making sure I'm staying relaxed and I'm not flicking out the fingers too far. And then I'm switching back. So, switching back to flicking, see? Even a close-up with the camera here, it's hard to tell if I'm flicking or plucking, so I'm just going to say it. So that whole time I was flicking, now plucking. I already feel much better, even from just doing this live demonstration and explaining through this whole time. My fingers feel much more control. Now, last thing before we finish here, let's just do this with M and A. Oops, so I started on open string. Let's start on F. Now, normal plucking. Makes normal plucking between these two more lesser used fingers so much easier. And hopefully you're feeling that at home too. Great. Well, thanks for joining in these fun exercises with me, and please leave your comments if you haven't already, because otherwise I will likely miss them. And thanks for following along this long. This is thanks for practicing with me for this long. It's been a really fun time so far, and I really enjoy your comments. Like always, you can connect with me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. And yeah, let's go ahead and get to some questions. Thanks so much for joining me for week 7 of developing the right hand. Cool. All right. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you're able to get some things from this, and we're going to go ahead and start off with some question and answer. So if there's anything about classical guitar, anything, no stupid questions, really. Just you can ask anything. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Just, I know there's a lot of confusing things, and it's a totally different style. So anyways, let me get to some questions here, and feel free to drop whichever ones you have on YouTube, Facebook, or the Jam Play site for now. Okay, peace and mode. My fingers start almost twitching when I try to control them in this technique. Do you have any advice for getting them under control? Good question. So, twitching when I try to control them in this technique. What I imagine you're experiencing is a little bit of shaking when you're losing control of those fingers. And what I notice that happens is that whenever we're doing an unfamiliar movement or we're doing it really slow, we'll typically have things that, like, our fingers will react in some sort of strange way. Actually, if you do something in your left hand, I always give this example where you do something like this, right? But you go really slow and you try to distribute it over like 10 seconds. Like, watch, I'm just moving my fingers from one spot to another. I notice them shaking, and actually really, because you know, you lose a little bit of control when you go that slow when you're trying to really do refined movements. So that's okay. If they're, I'm curious exactly what you mean by twitching, but I assume you mean some sort of tremble or shake when that's happening. And that's probably just because there's not a lot of control. You probably haven't built up that extensor motion very much. So I would be weary of that. Yeah, shaking. Exactly. That is pretty normal. Like I said, after you go through the string and you're doing this type of stuff, I would just try to completely relax your finger. Don't hold the tension out, right? Don't like point, like I was saying earlier, like don't end up in a point. Just flick through the strings and then come back to your neutral position when you're playing. That's a really good way to go about it. And do that with every finger. And one way you could see if it's certainly that, just lack of training, is if you do it with your pinky or with your ring finger. If it's more so with those fingers, then it's very obvious, right? It's just a lack of control. It could be related to a lot of different things, but that's a good one to relate it to. Let's see. Another question. Rebel Yell. Does nail length have any impact on the sound of this Rasgueado technique? Yeah, it definitely has impact on the sound. Now, another thing nails help to do is to even out the disparity between your different fingers' lengths, right? And if you're having to move, like, say your pinky, and you're involving pinky in the Rasgueado, that's a much shorter finger, so you're going to be leaning your hand a lot more. Now, like flamenco players, for the most part that I've seen, they do lean a little bit towards that pinky. They lean in to give it more power. So that's something you can try doing also. For instance, if you're here, say in a normal position where you're going to play classical guitar, fingerstyle, or whatever, your pinky is kind of swinging, and you can see it's kind of barely catching the strings. It's maybe hitting one or so. But if you lean it this way a little bit, you see it catches a lot more. And that's a really helpful way to help even out the sound, regardless if you have nails or not. And you know, it's kind of funny, since you are hitting the strings the opposite direction, no matter what, it's going to hit your nail, whether they're long enough to be doing like plucking, like we're normally doing. It's going to hit your nail and fly off of that, and you know, likely it's not going to hit your skin so much afterwards. You're still going to be able to get a pretty percussive sound. And actually, there's some flamenco players that play without nails at all. So the most common thing is to have nails, like I said, and usually really thick nails, because you're doing a lot of, a whole lot of this motion and striking on the strings, which can wear down your nails too. But you can totally do this without nails and train up that technique. Okay. Sunny asks, can one get arthritis in the right hand with these exercises? Anything in excess is not going to be good. So, developing injuries, and whether it's things like arthritis from bones wearing against each other, I'm not a doctor, but anything in overuse is going to be a problem. So I really encourage you, when you're doing this exercise, to take breaks. Don't do this for hours at a time when you're bored. I mentioned when I was waiting on like a passenger when I was doing that driving job. But that is, that's like a couple of minutes of a wait and just trying to perfect the motion, not just like the power and the sheer force, but just trying to perfect the motion and get my hands used to that. So yeah, I would be really cautious of anything like that's excessive or overused. Like I mentioned earlier in this stream, it's really important to stand up and take breaks too, and stretch, be active, go swimming. Things like that are really good. Excuse me. Okay. Sunny also asks, if one just knows Rasgueado but not Abanico, can that be enough to play something decent on the guitar? Yeah, I mean, excuse me. Having a good Rasgueado technique is just one aspect of guitar playing, and even if you're trying to play just flamenco guitar, you're not going to hear someone just talk about Rasgueado. That's only one facet. It's like the percussive side to it, but there's a whole lyrical side, and rhythm is the base of all of this. It's not about a single technique. It's not about a sound. It's about rhythm. So that's me talking about a technique that I'm not an expert on, but have just used to help me develop my own technique and play more in the Spanish style and some minimal flamenco techniques. But yeah, generally, if someone develops a pretty good Rasgueado technique, they're not going to have many other. You'll probably see that they have strength in a lot of other areas too, because it's not something that people just pick up the guitar and start to develop in the beginning. It's something that you have after you have some basis of other techniques. So that's why it's really good to go back through these other lessons on jam play and build up some other techniques before you really dive into all of that. Okay, so unless there's any other questions, I believe that is all. Thank you so much for watching and for those questions, really interesting ones today. I'll catch you next week for an etude that combines a lot of different things. We're going to be talking about a few other techniques and articulations, which begin to get more complicated for the right hand, and some interesting musical exercises. So I'll see you at this time next week. Thanks for tuning in, and my name is Evan Tauscher with jamplay.com. See you next week.